Hi, welcome back to the next installment of Bedagiskwedawajokzeloumsen, A Dragon's Journey, the video version. I'll continue telling you the story, and I hope you enjoy it. We're going to read the first part of chapter 2 today, and all you have to do is kick back, relax, get ready, and enjoy the ride. Here we go. The next day dawned sunny and bright, with the closest cloud in the sky a wispy little thing that floated miles and miles and miles away from the comfortable dark cave lined with its glittering hoard that Beda called home. Beda stretched its black wings. They could be called leathery, if leathery meant thin, soft, supple, finely grained covering with as much in common with an animal's skin as the dew that covers the morning blooming flowers has with the mulberry silk that swaddles a newborn prince or princess that has remembered the magic and physics required to lift Beda into the heavens every day over 500 years. Beda opened and stretched its wings so that they just touched the cave's rocky ceiling and stomped its feet, all four of them, on the cave's floor, creating a booming echo that Beda repeated with its own reverberating roar. It was time to go to work. A dragon's work is calling all that is precious to it, then adding all that is especially special among what is merely precious to the dragon's hoard. A dragon can do its work while the sun shines, when the moon glows, or at any time in between. Weather means nothing to a dragon. Indeed, most weather is created by dragons to serve their own inscrutable intentions. And down east in Maine, Mainers remember the weather, but they have never made the connection that their weather is dragon-spawned. From the first hurricane that the English expatriates experienced in 1635, shortly after they washed ashore on the sand that would later be called Massachusetts, and the dragons of what would later be called New England noticed the new little pests, to the great freshet of October 1785 that coincidentally flooded and washed away almost all of the mills and bridges in the southwest corner of what would later be called Maine, just as the newest New Englanders began to move away from the congestion of cities like Boston and into the Dragon's realm. To the Great White Hurricane of 1888 that buried the entire East Coast from the Chesapeake to Maine in yards and yards of snow, to the Portland Gale in 1898 that, along with the cheerful assistance of a few sea serpents from the Grand Banks, sank over 100 ships and fishing boats, to the fires of 1947 that, once started by Maine's dragons, burned almost 20,000 acres of land near Mount Desert Island and lasted from that summer and into that fall, to the December nor'easter of 1960 that dropped the temperature like a stone into a well, brought tons and tons of heavy frozen precipitation to cover everything that lay anywhere even remotely down east, and punctuated its message with winds of almost 100 miles an hour. Oh, the people might have explained it away with, "It's a wicked cold out there, I'm telling you. Yesterday was flat calm, but it breezed up some this morning." Or, "Roads are getting wicked greasy out there. I'ma stay here and catch a humding of a buzz on." But the wicked cold, the breezing up, and the wicked greasy had a lot more to do with the dragons than with the vagaries of weather and the climate. Before Beda began its work for the day, it wanted to hear from its parent. That meant a short flight westish to the cell tower and phone lines at Cocajo, or eastish a few miles further to Millennicket's telecommunications hubs. Before it began what it was hatched to do, Beda wanted to call its parent's voice from the memory of the metal in the telecom lines. As Beda flew east, before it found the clouds it would cloak itself within, it called to the mist, Maine's thick, curious, and portentous fog. The mist has for hundreds of years, even before the Europeans arrived, lured the unwary astray onto rocks and towards death on the coast and away from the path and into doom in the thick forests. Now the mist would serve its dragon master as a simple cloak until it was no longer needed. Beda flew south of the mighty Mount Katahdin and roared its respectful greeting to Pomola, a monster, unseen but alive, who resided in the mountain's caves. The half-eagle, half-man with the head of a moose replied with a friendly roll of thunder. If Beda had been an unwelcome visitor to Pomola's mountain home, it would have warmed Beda away with howling winds, torrential rain, blasts of lightning, and barrages of thunder. For thousands of years, dragons had only been interested in the most precious metals. Why on earth, or in the heavens, would dragons call the lesser metals to them? Dragons were, well, dragons. Base metals had been aptly named. Tin, nickel, lead, zinc. What was the point? These lower metals had no value. They were not precious, like gold, silver, copper, ruthenium, rhodium, palladium, osmium, iridium, or platinum. They were not lustrous. They did not gleam, glow, glint, glimmer, sparkle, twinkle, glitter, glisten, or shimmer. Just as dragons were the most noble of creatures, the metals that dragons craved and hoarded were the most noble of metals. Gold, silver, copper, platinum, and palladium. That wasn't until the advent of fiber optic cables. The old telephone lines and old telephone and computer equipment had metals that dragons could call. Gold in circuit boards, SIM cards, and CPUs. Silver in capacitors, chips, and keyboards. Copper in wiring, heatsink, circuit boards, and chips. Platinum in hard drives and circuit boards. And palladium in capacitors and hard drives. But one day, the ingenious humans created fiber optic glass in furnaces as hot as a dragon's flame, 3,800 degrees Fahrenheit, more or less. The humans found a way to melt silicon and a very strange element, germanium, that is often found coincident with zinc, together to make thin threads of a new kind of glass that carries pulses of light at the speed of light. When fired from a laser within the glass to photoelectric cells that convert the light back into the digital information that had been converted into the pulses of light in the first place. Since dragons can call to any metal, they found that they could call to germanium too, although germanium could hardly be called a noble thing. As long as humans used wire-based lines, the dragons used the lines too, even the cables laid under the oceans. As the telecom grid expanded to cover all of the places that the old-fashioned lines could never go and began to utilize fiber optics and cell towers, dragons began to use the new technology as well. It was just a matter of calling a metal that the dragons had not thought worthy of their attention before. A cell phone is essentially an antenna that transmits radio waves in all directions and receives radio waves from all directions. The waves are absorbed and reflected by many kinds of objects before they reach a tower and after they have been transmitted by a tower. An antenna is metal that has been engineered to specific parameters that transmit and receive specific radio waves. A dragon is, essentially, a creature of metal that nature has engineered to acquire metals and all of their aspects. So as a dragon nears a landline, a tower, or even a cell phone, it can call to that transmitter, carrier, or receiver. The metals that mankind has chosen to carry its messages carries and remembers a dragon's call. A dragon's call moves along with human transmissions at the speed of light everywhere in the world. A human's call might cut out or lag in its transmission. This is never true for a dragon's call. Of course, if humans could manage to grow antennas and batteries and telecommunications central processing units the way they grow a liver or a lung or a brain, then humans might, in a few thousand years, be able to use radio waves as effortlessly as dragons do. Beda flew on, surrounded by the mist, until it came to the little human settlement of Millinocket. Millinocket sits smack dab in the middle of the eastern slopes that ease down from Mount Katahdin, Baxter Peak, and Hamlin Peak, surrounded by a necklace of deep blue lakes. Millinocket sits close to the northern end of the Appalachian Trail and draws hundreds of hikers and outdoors people to its beautiful outdoor vistas and trails. And with the lodges and cabins and inns and pubs and restaurants and markets and general stores and trading posts that serve the visiting humans, Beda had no problem finding a place to take its call. Still hidden in the cloud that was the mist, Beda created more of the water vapor that is the stuff of fog and its taller cousins, as well as stuff that is like a second skin to dragons. Beda rose until it was a mile above the humans and their paraphernalia, and then opened itself to its parents' call. The magic of technology happened instantaneously. Its parents spoke and explained to Beda that it had arrived in Arizona and had found a mountain with a cave to call its own. Beda's parent described the small prickly cacti that passed for trees in that part of the world and told of mountains that made old Katahdin small in the telling. The dragon parent asked about the younger dragon's plans, and Beda told its parent that it would be working to add to its hoard and how the young dragon planned to spend the day roaming the skies of Maine, searching for streams where precious metal lay waiting under thin streams of water, where they had all been uncovered by liquid currents, and mines abandoned and working to use as well. The two dragons talked using the humans' radio waves for a time, longer than humans would have expected, but much shorter than they would have had they been together in a single place. The older dragon knew that the time the two had to talk must be short, to keep the humans unmindful of the young dragons present in their midst. The parent told its offspring of the depths of its love and the empty place in its heart. Beda heard its sire say these things and was consumed with a fire of contentment that filled its core like a lake of molten gold. Beda's parent felt the younger dragon's joy. Some things need no words in order to be shared. Beda's parent said, "My words will leave you now, but all that you are fills the deep cave that was once my empty heart." And Beda, even as he heard the echoes of its parent's voice fade, knew that its once empty heart was now full. After the call, Beda felt happier and less alone than it had, and was determined to make its parent proud by calling an extra large haul of treasure to it on its first day of work without its parent. But before Beda went to work, it sent pitchforks and hammer-handled, toad-strangling, turd-floating, gully-washing, cobbler's knives throwing, tractor-tossing, sizzly, sod-soaking nubbin to douse any human heads that might have been stuck out of doors that day. Sending the rainstorm to pound the ground made Beda happy, and it was certain that it would have made Beda's parents smile as well. Where could Beda search first? There were mines, abandoned and active, all over the state, but only a few that harbored the precious metals that dragons hunted. Other precious metals could be found in the streams and rivers that sliced through and exposed veins of gold as they wandered through the rock that confined the gushing water. But the only place to find platinum was hundreds of feet below the surface of the ocean that crashed endlessly against the rock-bound coast. Beda and every other dragon loved the warmth and weight of gold, but for a dragon's hoard, sometimes nothing but platinum would do. Platinum is much more rare than gold, and while gold has a rich, long, and noble history, Egyptians first worked in platinum almost 3,000 years ago. In the New World, the Incas high in the Andes Mountains used platinum, beginning their affair with the white metal 1,000 years after the Egyptians. The Europeans came late to the lustrous party, first making gleaming jewelry to decorate the delicate neck of Marie Antoinette, Dauphine of France, and later Queen of France and Navarre, a scant 250 years ago. Platinum is stronger than gold and heavier and denser than gold. When used by humans, it is purer than gold. Its elegant white gleam is difficult to obtain. 10 tons of ore must be mined to produce an ounce of platinum. In a woman's jewelry or in a dragon's hoard, platinum's neutral color intensifies the brilliance and depths of any gemstone. And like the dragons who adore the metal, platinum never tarnishes or fades. But a dragon in Maine would have to fly out over the Atlantic Ocean to spot about 50 miles offshore, halfway between Portland and Provincetown, to the wreck of the SS Port Nicholson, a British merchantman sent to the bottom under 700 feet of salt water by a German torpedo in the 1940s. For Beda, that excursion could wait for another day. Beda could always try the abandoned Edwards and Walker gold mine on the way to Machias, or the equally forsaken Early Dawn or Portland and Sullivan silver mines down by the coast near Frenchman's Bay. But those mines had been abandoned for good reason, and Beda was no scavenger. Beda was a dragon. So Beda did what dragons all over the world have been doing for thousands of years. It flew to working mines. There were precious metals to call to itself that would soon grace its hoard. From the stormy weather in Millinocket, Beda flew east from cloud to other working mines. Vinegar Hill gave the dragon copper and gold, and Shorey Prospect, a hill away to the south, provided gold and silver. Then Beda flew northwest and roared its greeting to Poco, the enormous legless dragon who lived in Poco Moonshine Lake. Beda laughed as it saw Poco look up at Beda's thundering regard and shake its serpent's head in acknowledgement. The pine trees covered nearly every inch of ground there, making Beda's search for the St. Croix River complicated. Eventually, Beda saw a gleam of running water below and swooped down to inspect the stream. It called to the gold in the Runnels alluvial deposits and closed its eyes in glee as the gold entered Beda to be added later to the dragon's trove. The placer added little to Beda's store of metal compared to the mine's contributions, but precious metals are always treasured by dragons. All noble metals are held in high regard by those who depend on them. Beda then flew northeast to the Mount Chase mine, where the dragon called copper and silver to itself. Then northwest again to Chandler Mountain, and a mine whose gold also was called to make itself part of the wonder that was the dragon. Beda flew east and then south to scour the bench and alluvial placers of Goldbrook and the south branch of the Penobscot for their glittering deposits. Then it flew further west to the courses of the Sandy River and Swift River and Nile Brook and finally Kibbe Stream. And when the waterways had given Beda their all, the dragon flew to the mines of Kibbe Prospect, Alder Pond, and Chase Stream for the copper, silver, and gold that they held. By the time that Beda had visited these final mines, the dragon was tired. It was full of the precious metals, and the sun was beginning to set. Beda could almost hear its cave and its hoard calling. It was time to return home. Traveler Mountain and Beda's Cave beneath it rises in glory above Lower South Branch Pond to its west and Long Pond, Bullfish Pond, and Grand Lake Matagamon to the north. From the west, North Traveler Ridge, Center Ridge, and Pinnacle Ridge join and lead to the peak of the ridges, Little Knife Edge, and finally the Traveler's Summit. The ridges are exposed and steep, and fields of scree cover the slopes of the mountain. It's a lonely place where the weather is harsh and unforgiving, and because of this, human hikers have only recently begun disturbing the dragon's solitude.